know. Hare Krishna. That's good. Thank you. So continuing. Vishvaksena Katasu Ya Na Utpadayet Yadi Ratim Shramaha Eva Hi Kevalam Dharmasvanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Katasuya Notpadayat Yatiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Dharmasvanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Katasuya Notpadayat Yatiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Dharmasvanushtita Pumsam Vishvaksena Katasuya Notpadayat Yadiratim Shrama Eva Hi Kevalam Dharmasvanushtita Pumsam Word means dharma, occupation, svanushtitaha, executed in terms of one's own position, pumsam, of humankind, Vishvaksena, the personality of Godhead, plenary portion, Katasu, in the message of, Ya, what is, Na, not, Utpadayet, does produce, Yadi, if, Ratim, attraction, Sharmaha, useless labor, Eva, only, He, certainly, Kevalam, entirely. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Please repeat. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. Jai Shri Prabhupada's purport. There are different occupational activities in terms of a man's different conceptions of life. To the gross materialist who cannot see anything beyond the gross material body, there is nothing beyond the senses. Therefore, his occupational activities are limited to concentrated and extended selfishness. Concentrated selfishness centers around the personal body. This is generally seen amongst the lower animals. Extended selfishness is manifested in human society and centers around the family, society, community, nation, and world with a view to gross bodily comfort. Above these gross materialists are the mental speculators who hover aloft in the mental spheres, and their occupational duties involve making poetry and philosophy, or propagating some ism with the same aim of selfishness limited to the body and the mind. But above the body and mind is the dormant spirit soul, whose absence from the body makes the whole range of bodily and mental selfishness completely null and void. Read that again. But above the body and mind is the dormant spirit soul, whose absence from the body makes the whole range of bodily and mental selfishness completely null and void. But less intelligent people have no information of the needs of the spirit soul. Because foolish people have no information of the soul and how it is beyond the purview of the body and mind, they are not satisfied in the performance of their occupational duties. The question of the satisfaction of the self is raised herein. The self is beyond the gross body and subtle mind. He is the potent, active principle of the body and mind. Without knowing the need of the dormant soul, one cannot be happy simply with emolument of the body and mind. The body and mind are but superfluous outer coverings of the spirit soul. The spirit soul's needs must be fulfilled. Simply by cleansing the cage of the bird, one does not satisfy the bird. One must actually know the needs of the bird himself. Prabhu gets very poetic in this purport. The need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of a material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and the spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. There is a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the gross body and mind in the form of perverted affection for gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will evoke our divine consciousness. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord. In any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing and chanting the transcendental message of Godhead is said herein to simply be a waste of time. I'll read that again. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will evoke our divine consciousness. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord. And any occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing and chanting the transcendental message of Godhead is said herein to be simply a waste of time. This is because other occupational duties, whatever ism they may belong to, cannot give liberation to the soul. Even the activities of the salvationists are considered to be useless because of their failure to pick up the fountainhead of all liberties. Fountainhead meaning the source of all liberties. The gross materialist can practically see that his material gain is limited only to time and space, either in this world or in the other. Even if he goes up to Svarga Loka, he will find no permanent abode for his hankering soul. The hankering soul must be satisfied by the perfect scientific process of perfect devotional service. All glories to Prabhupada's perfect purport. This is one of Prabhupada's many very, very beautiful, as I mentioned, poetic purports. Om Jnana Tamyandasya Janan Anjana Shalakaya Chakshur Om Minitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayamrupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapanantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So I think it's okay. I'm going to do a little higher. Okay, thanks. So, it's interesting to see when we read the Bhagavatam and the Gita and Chaitanya Charitamrita and all of Prabhupada's translations, and then in addition his purports, the same theme is there again and again and again. You know, I remember years ago when I was in Denver, somebody complained to me because they said the Sunday feasts, they're all the same. Lectures, you know, the lectures. The feasts were a little different, but the lectures were the same. Feasts are the same too. Halav every week, sabji every week, rice every week. So, but in one sense it was a valid critique that we should try to make our presentations of Krishna consciousness varied and interesting for people. That's a valid point. But also, there certainly is repetition in the Gita, in one purport. Prabhupada specifically mentions, he says, Krishna here is repeating himself. He says, but repetition of a good thing is a good thing. That's paraphrasing his comment. And the reason it's a good thing is because we still haven't understood it yet. Just like we can remember, I'm staying at I'm not sure whose house, Rohit and I are staying at somebody's house, and they have little kids. So I was looking at some of the things they have on the wall. And I was remembering that with education, children and adults too, but repetition is so important, isn't it? You start the school year out. I'm not a teacher, but I think, any teachers here? Sunday school, okay, so similar there. But I was thinking like in the public schools, at least the first week or two or maybe a month, you're repeating everything you learned last time. And then you learn some new material, and then they repeat it again. And then you take summer vacation, then you start and they repeat it all over again. And even like at the college level, say you take Introduction to Philosophy, they do an overview of everything. And then you take, okay, Greek philosophy, and you take what you already learned and you just repeat it and you go a little deeper. It's not that when you get to the higher levels you discard. And so sometimes I thought the introductory class was really the most important one, because you covered so many things, even if you didn't go so deep. But repetition is there. So in a similar way, the same message is there throughout the Bhagavatam and the Gita. But here, just looking at the Bhagavatam, we study certain, just like this is just a straight philosophical statement, and then discussion. And often in the Bhagavatam, throughout actually, a spiritual teacher is explaining, and then the students are questioning and asking for clarification. And then they go in a long history. That's an interesting question. Once upon a time, this happened. And then you go all the way back and there's this whole story. And then when you get done with the story, it's like, oh, now I get it. Now I understand. I'm supposed to surrender to Krishna. Or I'm supposed to give up my false ego. Or like, I just, not too long ago, saw, I guess in Mayapur, Bhakti Marg Swami's crew gave the drama of Chitraketu, particularly the part where he has so many queens and he just wants a son because he's a king, and a big part of the king's duty is you got to have consistency in the government. It wasn't just all, false ego. In the ultimate sense, it's all false ego, but it wasn't just a selfish desire. The king's he's got to take care of the kingdom. And we know when there's problems, when there's not a smooth transition in the government, it creates chaos. Even in America a few years ago, right, when they was a Bush and whoever, and the election wasn't clear. It was chaos. It was panic. Like it's going to be civil war if there's not some process in place. So, because you need consistency. So the king wants consistency, and he didn't have a son. And then he got the benediction, can have a son, he's going to bring some happiness, but he's going to bring some suffering as well. You go through this whole thing, and you're watching the story, and you're feeling his pain, and they did a beautiful job in Mayapur. I remember the young women that portrayed the envious queens. You just look at them and you feel like, ooh, I hate you. You're nasty people. Why you're going to kill your stepson? You are so nasty. So you get completely pulled into the whole drama, and you feel his pain and his anxiety, and the sages come and they speak to him, and then the whole thing, then you realize, at least some little realization, I shouldn't be so attached. But it's like we already heard that. How many times have we heard that? Even like, in the temple, the devotees are always kind to us. Something goes wrong, like your car gets smashed, and somebody who drives an old car 20 years older than yours will just say, well, don't be attached. Anything. Well, that's easy for you to say. Your car's worth $500. This is a brand new $25,000, $35,000 car. So who are you to tell me to be detached? But devotees are very kind. They just tell you like it is. Sometimes you can be very sick. Devotees say, you're not that body. It's like, well, that's easy for you to say because you're not feeling what I'm feeling being in this body. So it's very easy to be detached for other people, right? But the point being that the message is there. It's repeated again and again, and that's a good thing, so that it goes deeper. And we've all had the experience. Sometimes you'll be hearing a class or just chanting or doing some save or whatever, and sometimes it just comes in your brain. So, oh, now I get it. Oh, now I understand. Oh, that's right. It's like this beautiful example of the bird in the cage that Prabhupada references here. That if you clean the cage of the bird, it doesn't satisfy the needs of the bird. And we've all heard that many, many times, and we've probably explained it to people many, many times. But the more we hear it, then we start thinking, oh, that's right. And not only that's right, but oh, that applies to me. Again, it's very easy to kind of look at other devotees or people in the world and say, I know sometimes there's a tendency to be sitting in a class and thinking, I hope she's hearing this because she really, this is definitely meant for her. Or him, isn't it? Gosh, Anuttama, who told Anuttama about his problems? Because boy, he is really hitting it over the head with that one, But meanwhile, Anuttama's probably sitting here, hopefully thinking, gosh, I really need to take this seriously. Prabhupada's talking to me right here. So the repetition is there because we need to, because we're, as I described, we're penetrating through layers of covering. So just like children, they need to repeat it again and again and again. I was sitting on the plane, there was a lady one row over, and she was Chinese. I know because of a whole complication, and I knew that she was Chinese. But she had a little baby, and she was singing to the baby through half the trip, and part of it was things in Chinese that I didn't understand, and then once in a while she'd go, she'd sing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and she'd lift up the baby. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and lift up the baby. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and lift up the baby. And I was thinking, it's okay, I got it already. I know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You don't have to teach the whole plane. We got that part of it. But for the child, repeating, it's a good thing. Sometimes these educational TV shows, I don't know what they have on today, but Sesame Street or something. It's again and again and again. It's okay, here's orange, here's orange, here's orange, here's red, here's red, here's red, just by repetition. So in a similar way for ordinary education, the same thing is there within our spiritual practice. We have to, as Prabhupada says, we hearing and chanting, we have to hear again and again and again. So in this particular verse, again, the same message is there, that this is the Vedic and absolutely the Bhagavatams and absolutely the Gaudiya and absolutely the ISKCON and absolutely our community's proposed solution to all the frustrations in life. I can remember, he talked a little bit, somebody asked me yesterday about my personal experience, and I can remember being a little bewildered. Prabhupada mentions the isms here, that he says a certain level of people are propagating some ism, communism, capitalism, socialism, feminism, etc. As an overriding idea how to address the problems that people are facing. But they're all in some degree or other, they're in conflict. And I can remember sometimes as a devotee going to a couple animal rights conventions and somebody's working to save the whales and somebody else is save the baboons and somebody else is save the white-backed gorillas. I think silverbacked gorillas, and somebody else has saved the dolphins. And I would kind of think, is there any kind of like underlying solution here? And of course the analogy is given that just if you have some disease in the body, you can treat the symptoms. I remember years ago, I think maybe because in the original early days the standards of hygiene in ISKCON weren't so good, especially people go to India and sometimes in temples. Devotees used to get a lot of boils. I remember when I first came, I'd never heard of a boil, but it seemed that everybody was getting boils. And it was kind of a very painful thing. It gets some kind of eruption in your skin and some infection underneath. And the example is given, I think Prabhu even specifically says, if you get a boil, you can blow on it, cools it for a minute, but it doesn't solve the problem. So if there's some disease in the body, if you go to a doctor and if you're very ill with whatever the thing is, they want to try to figure out what's the root cause. And they don't just cure the symptoms. And sometimes we may think, well, can you just cure the symptom? I've got some back pain, and the doctor says, well, okay, back pain, that's bad, but there's a tumor causing the back pain, and we got to remove that tumor. Or say like, oh, I'm itching. Okay, well, we can try to deal with the itching, but you have shingles. There's a deeper nervous issue that's got to be addressed. So in a similar way, through the eyes, Chakshusastra, seen through the eyes of Shastra, we're being trained. We see so many difficulties, personal challenges that we face, bodily challenges, mental challenges, emotional challenges, financial challenges, social challenges, health challenges, etc. They're always there. There's always, life is really a struggle. They use that description, the struggle for existence. So there's so many different struggles, but through the eyes of the Bhagavatam, it's trying to help us take to heart that there's an underlying solution. Now when you go to the doctor and he says, okay, it's shingles, we need to deal with the underlying problem, he doesn't also, or she doesn't just say, so ignore the itching. He says, I know there's itching. We're going to deal with the itching, but we're going to go beyond that. We're going to deal with the underlying cause. Well, I know there's some back pain. I'm going to give you some pain pills, or I'm going to give you some exercises, or I'm going to tell you to change your diet a little bit. But we're going to deal with the underlying problem. So here that's what's being described, that there's this frustration that people experience in modern day life. There's a lack of satisfaction. And the remedy is the analysis of the problem is given here, but also the solution. And the solution being they don't have to change the activities or the different, probably in this context, that translates Dharma as occupation. We know it has many connotations, but so it's not just to change the occupation. And sometimes people do that. It's very common in the world today. People, they'll try this job in this city, and then they'll try that job in this city, and they'll move around from place to place. People are kind of, what's the term? Common word is antsy. There's a better word than that. They're unsettled. There's this disturbance in the mind, go from place to place to place. In many places, Prabhupada mentions it briefly here, the soul can even go to higher planets. But the same situation is there. The same problem is there. So it's not a question of changing activity, but changing consciousness. And we know this is, again, repetition of message. The same message is there in the Gita. Arjuna says to Krishna, this is a mess. This is horrible. First he says, take me to the middle of the battlefield. Then he says, oh my goodness, I do not like the look of this. This is a lose-lose situation. He says, modern terminology, this is lose-lose. If I lose the battle, I lose everything. And if I win, I have to kill all these people that are close to me, so it's a loss either way. I'm just going to leave. I'm going to quit. I'm going to renounce everything. I'm going to go to the forest. And Krishna, we know, in short, starts out says, you're foolish to think like that, because that's your nature. You have to fight somehow or other. You have to do something. Your senses have to be engaged in some way. But, Arjuna, you have to change your consciousness. You have to change your consciousness. And if you change your consciousness, even in the middle of I don't know if we could even imagine a more difficult, heinous, hellish situation to have to try to change your consciousness than a civil war with family members and your grandfather and your teacher, your beloved teacher. You're the favorite disciple of your guru, and you have to fight against and try to kill them. I mean, who among us would say anything other than, where's the door? This is not a good situation. I'm leaving. So it's amazing that Krishna, I think in part, to kind of drill down to us how it can be done in any situation, and it has to be done even in the most difficult situation. So we might think sometimes, we all probably think, but Prabhu, you don't understand how difficult my situation is. You know, I mean, I've got maybe some life-threatening disease, or, you know, the economy just fell apart, I lost my job, I lost my status, and, you know, or somebody did some type of intrigue in the office and they turned the boss against me, and not only did I lost my job, they won't give me a good recommendation, or the whole economy has changed. And what happens to a lot of people these days, you know, I'm whatever, 40, 50, 60 years old, and all of a sudden the whole technology changes, nobody wants me anymore. Those types of things. Or, but Prabhu, you don't understand, you know, I just lost a child, and, you know, we've been trying to have children, and I had 2 or 3 children, or whatever, and I just lost a baby, you know, or I've got to go to war, or my son was drafted, or, you know, they don't draft people these days, whatever, so many things. There was a terrible accident, or my mother's so sick, or she's been so sick, and how can I possibly be Krishna conscious in the midst of that? And, you know, if we look back in terms of our own situations, we all kind of think, whatever the degree of challenges we have, there's a tendency to think, I don't know if I can handle this. And maybe you're strong, and you've got so many burdens, but I may only have this burden, but for me it's unfathomable. It's the ocean. That analogy is given there too, the ocean of material difficulties. But Acharyas say, even if we think we face the ocean of material difficulties, they directly address that and say, when you become Krishna conscious, what happens? It shrinks to the amount of water in the footprint of a calf. So it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty, they anticipated that question. And the same way Krishna anticipated, yeah, but Lord, it's so, I mean, my problems are so tough. Like, okay, well, let's look at Arjuna. How's your face up to Arjuna? Is your guru on the other side? Is it a civil war? Do you have to kill those people? Is it life or death for the whole world? Have you tried every possible thing for years and years and years and none of it worked? Have they tried to assassinate you repeatedly? I mean, there are people in the world that have to deal with those things. You know, in America, not many of us are going to face that they're trying to assassinate us. You know, do they set your house, and do they trap you in a house and set it on fire? No, but you see, I have this boss who's really hard to work with. You know, I remember when I was about a 6 or 7 year devotee, and I was asked to go start a preaching center, college outreach center in Boulder, Colorado. And the GBC at that time was Rameshwar Maharaj at that time. And I was kind of having some doubts whether I could do it. And some of the devotees who were going to be there were elder than me, and I was, you know, had some concerns about if I could really do that service. So I went to see him, and with the temple president, Savas, Prabhu was still in LA, temple president, said, you know, Maharaj, I don't think I can do this. And he listened to me for a minute or two. He said, how long have you been a devotee? I said, 7 years. And he said, 7 years. He said, let me think, what was I doing after 7 years as a devotee? So remember, they've asked me to go like run a little preaching center, like a 3-bedroom house and a campus, and maybe $2,000 overhead, etc. He said, okay, 7 years. He said, I was a sannyasi, I was a BBT trustee, I was a GBC, and initiating spiritual master. And he looked at me and said, I think you can handle Boulder. And, you know, it kind of reminded me, you know, Prabhu talked about when she first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he was defeated, you know. So I was totally defeated. So I said, thank you, Maharaj, you paid my obeisances, and I left. What else could I say? I was completely intellectually defeated. He did that in 7 years, and I can't take this much risk. So in a similar way, we have our different challenges, but describe the solution is change our consciousness and not change the activity. And by changing our consciousness, it gives meaning. I was even noticing last night, simple thing. But they brought us prasadam, and I'm sitting there and I'm feeling hungry. So I started to just eat, and I said, no, slow down. Don't just, just slow down. This is Krishna prasadam. This is sanctified, spiritualized food that's actually been accepted, cooked in devotion by the devotees, accepted by the Lord, and just by tasting and honoring and nourishing my body with this food, this is spiritual activity. I'm connecting with Krishna. And when I did that, I can honestly, in my dull consciousness, it tasted so wonderful. Just take a deep breath, realize the opportunity that's here. So in that way, we know our process is connect things with Krishna. So when we do that, when we change our consciousness in that way, it gives meaning. So just eating, we live in America. This is the land of fast food. Don't purify your food. Don't eat strengthening food. Don't be grateful for your food. Don't offer your food. Just fast food. Right? And the faster, the better. And please don't stop and ask about its nutritional value. Don't do that, because that'll be too disturbing. Just eat something quick and don't think about the ingredients. So it's a very different pressure on people, but I know in Italy they have something, I don't know if it's still going on, but a few years ago they had something called the slow food movement. Because their culture is very different. It's family and tradition, and you sit down and you have a 2-hour lunch and all those kind of things. So there's some struggle there. But here it's being described, whatever we do, it's useless labor if it doesn't help us increase our attraction for Krishna. If it doesn't help us connect with Krishna, it's ultimately useless. And if we do make that connection, then it gives us meaning. It gives us a sense of purpose. And we understand that our Vaishnava teaching is that we're all servants. That's our position. And elsewhere in one of these beautiful purports in this, I believe the same chapter, Prabhupada uses expression, he says that this serving the Lord is this exact quote, the most congenial form of intimacy, to be a servant. And as it describes, everything's upside down. Gita, right, describes that the material world is like a banyan tree on the side of a lake. Everything's upside down. So here to be a servant is considered not a good thing. The goal, you want as many servants as you possibly can. Like Hiranyakashipu, right? He wasn't just happy conquering the world. He needed to conquer the universe. And once the universe was conquered, he became peaceful and full in himself, right? He was just more agitated, just more disturbed. And when his son was not exactly the way he wanted, he's furious and he's ready to kill everybody. And then he's even ready to kill his son because he's so contented with life, even though he's conquered the whole universe. So we're all servants, and we see practically that that's the fact. Even people that don't want to be servants, you have to serve the boss. I read something somewhere as an American citizen, pretty much up until May 1st, and maybe it's more now or less, but pretty much up until about May 1st, if you start work on January 1st, everything you make until May goes to taxes. Income taxes and property taxes and gasoline taxes and everything else. So that means we're rendering service to somebody else. And we have to serve our boss and serve our family members and serve our body in so many ways. But here this verse is explaining, if in the midst of those occupational activities or duties or obligations, if we just connect those with Krishna, then it actually makes us happy. And again, this is another one of those bold claims that made in the Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada gives this nice example we've all heard many times. If you have a whole bunch of zeros, if you just put a 1 in front, all of a sudden it has so much value. So, simple things. If someone is frustrated in life, or not, ultimately we would say not spiritually conscious, even the rising and the setting of the sun, the Bhagavatam says, is just taking away their lives. But even like, the average person kind of, let's say a certain percentage, they wake up, they use this word, drudgery. They wake up, it's drudgery. Like today's Saturday, like I was on this plane last night, I was thinking everybody's kind of in a good mood because it's Friday. And they're all going home, pretty much. But you get on the same plane Monday morning, the whole mood is different. Because for a lot of people, life is just drudgery. They drag themselves to work, and then they drag themselves home. And then they have this ridiculous thing, happy hour, right? It's just like cheap. It's a cheap, means the liquor's a little cheaper. Because, rather than starting to drinking at night, which generally people would do if they drink, we want to get you in at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So you just stay all night long and spend all your money. So it's just drudgery for so many people. But if we add a little Krishna in the morning, of course, even putting aside our chanting and seeing the deities and all that, if we're Krishna conscious, just seeing the sun come up, it's like, wow, look at Krishna's amazing artistry. And this is amazing. Of course, there's so many scientific explanations, but we know you can talk to astrologers in this sense, or astronomers. When it gets down to it, they don't really know why it comes up. They'll explain this force and this and this and this. When you get down to like, why does that happen? Because of this. Oh, why does that happen? Well, because of this. Why does that happen? We're working on that, isn't it? When we know there's a lot of scientists in our congregation, you ask them, it always gets down to like, well, we're not really sure of that. So at the end of every single study, it's inconceivable. So devotee, we have this sense. So just seeing the sun come up, look at Krishna's majesty and his amazing powers, which he says in the Bhagavad Gita are just a spark of his splendor. And somehow I'm able to connect with him by his grace. So in this way, all of these, what many people see are zeros, the sun coming. Of course, some people appreciate those things that are more in tune with nature and a more grateful heart. But for a lot of people, it's just, you get up in the morning, you turn on the news. How many, where's the traffic this morning? And how many people, were shot last night? And, whether does my stock portfolio, oh great, I'm worth $117 more than it was yesterday. And then the next morning is, oh, I'm worth $211 less than I was. People, that's what they think about. Like, how can you be peaceful? But to be able to add Krishna to our occupational activities and use them to help us connect, it gives us meaning, it makes us more peaceful. And then instead of everything being of little value, like existentialists, right? There's a whole school of philosophy, which is if you analyze everything far enough, it's totally meaningless. And some of the great leading thinkers in that school of thought, they just committed suicide. Because as not just out of, some pressure, but just intellectually, philosophically drove themselves to it has no meaning, so why should I even live? Whereas as we awaken our Krishna consciousness, like Prabhu says, we want to get out, it's so wonderful, we want to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage. We want to experience complete freedom. We want to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe, see the free light and the spirit. This purpose is almost like you can go to a New Age convention or something like that. You see it up on the wall, see the free light and the spirit. So Prabhu is, speaking in these terms to help us know. So we want freedom, but here's advocating freedom from possessiveness, freedom from anger, freedom from selfishness, freedom from doubt, freedom from not experiencing Krishna. And when those things happen, then actually, as it's described here, then we actually can experience the happiness that everyone's hankering for. So as devotees, it's our responsibility to try to apply ourselves to the process of bhakti as best we can, knowing that we're all, we make mistakes, and sometimes we're very, very inspired, sometimes we're not so inspired, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy, sometimes we're attentive, sometimes we're not so attentive. But it's a sadhana. It's something that we make a commitment to do. I was just actually thinking, because I've been traveling some, I haven't given so many classes recently, And my mind always is, I have a very encouraging mind. So as I'm getting ready to give class, it's telling me things like, how can you speak? You haven't given a class in so long, you've been busy, you've been traveling, and, you're going to waste all these poor people's time, and better you sit down, let someone else speak, whatever. And then my intelligence chimed in a little bit. I was thinking, I may be my dear mind, here's my response to you, I may be whatever I am, but I know I'm a servant of Krishna. And whatever I am, it may be so valuable, right? Some days I think, oh, you're so important, you're so good, you're so this, that, right, the mind. Or I may be of no value, but it doesn't matter. I'm a servant of Krishna. Whatever I am, let me try to do a little service. And because he's so wonderful and he's so magnanimous, I know he'll accept it. I mean, it's his choice, but whatever I may be, big, small, rich, poor, young, old, intelligent, foolish, I just want to try to do it for Krishna. So will you please be quiet for a moment, and let me just try to do what I can do for Krishna. So it's our duty to whatever our status and our situation in life, to do, as it described here, to do whatever our engagements are, to connect those with Krishna, and to offer those to Krishna. And when we do so, then even the smallest things start having tremendous meaning. And you start finding yourself being able to, get on the bus to work in the morning and greet people with a big smile, say good morning. And maybe even sneaking in a good morning, Nitai Gaur. Or maybe even good morning, Hare Krishna. They go, what? Hare Krishna, can you say that? Hare Krishna, yeah, thank you. Little drops, give me little drops. So we have this duty to become Krishna conscious and share Krishna conscious, and as Prabhu says, we do that by connecting what we do to Krishna, focusing on hearing and chanting and all these different devotional activities that awaken that understanding in us. So I'll stop there. We've got about 8 minutes left on that clock. Any questions or comments? We could do one of those things where we just throw the microphone up in the air, and wherever it lands, you have to ask a question. You have to ask a question. Yes, Prabhu.
Question, Prabhu.
Okay.
It was very connecting to me. One of the things about repetition. For Bhattacharya member, she was telling you repeating. That's the reason we are extending the time. It's made more clear. It's the message is being repeated. I was trying to see how to touch on that. For the clarity both sides.
Yes.
That the message is repeating and also.
Yeah, repeating and also trying to make sure it's fresh. We have to try to make it fresh for people. Shouldn't be like we record a class on Sunday or Friday night and we tell the Bhakti Vriksha members, now you have to come every Friday and we're going to replay the same talk until you get it down. That wouldn't work. So same message. And that's again the Bhagavatam, the same message all the way through, told in different ways, different stories to catch our mind, get our attention. Like that. So good. Thank you. Good comment. Yeah. She's very good to always have in a class. If she's there, there's going to be questions. That's very good. Thank you. You have to come to all my classes this weekend.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is, I have 2 kids. One is 7, one is 13 years old. 2 daughters. And I find myself so busy working and juggling through household things. And how do I develop that habit of sitting with my kids and reading?
How do I develop habits of what with your kids?
Sitting with my kids.
Sitting with your
and
kids.
Reading, make it a habit, commit to it every day. Can you give me some advice?
Well, one thing, you're blessed because you're in a woman's body, which means you're much better than the other half of the society in multitasking. They've done studies on that, Women are very good at multitasking, and I don't know Krishna's design, but my wife and I business for many, many years. I was practically the only man in the company. We'd have a management meeting. We're going to talk about the financial plan. And within 3 minutes, this one's talking about the hiring. This one's talking about the new line of clothes coming in the fall. This one's talking about the problems they're having with the staff member. And I'm like, wait. I tell them, look, you're forgetting there's a man in the room, okay? We need to talk about finance, okay? Then we can talk about staffing. that we, but they were quite comfortable and somehow could keep track of those whole things. And I mean, half in jest, but it's true. Actually, it's true. So I would just suggest, think in terms of multitasking. You want to try to find ways where you're achieving multiple things at one time. So you want your kids to have some nice Christian conscious experience. So, as an example, you can be reading, you mentioned reading, you can read Christian conscious things with your children. So they're simultaneously getting some Christian consciousness, you're getting some Christian consciousness, and you're spending that mother-daughter time with them. And I know that I'm no expert at raising kids, but some things that I've read particularly talks about, even kids don't necessarily need that much time, but they need quality time. So they really need to sense that you're with them at that time. So, and of course they also need just to like having you around is a wonderful thing. But I would think that's one thing to look in terms of, okay, and to try to schedule. It's tough, but somehow you get to work on time every day, don't you? Isn't it? You get gas in your car before it runs out, right? We all get food in our stomachs before we starve. So part of it is just really making that commitment. This is a priority. And then looking out. No, we're not going to talk time management later today, but just, make a list of what those priorities are and how can we try to put it in. And one kind of practical tip they give is you have to schedule those things ahead of time. You can't wait till Thursday night at 9 o'clock and you've got 2 phone calls to make and the sink's full of dishes and your kids are supposed to go to bed and how am I supposed to find time with them? That's too late. Don't try. Go to sleep. Be peaceful. Clean the dishes first. Just go start tomorrow. But if you plan ahead of time, okay, depending on the needs, every evening at 8:30, everything else stops and we're going to spend a half an hour together. Or as a family, like the Mormons are really good at this. Like once a week, they have to have family home night. Doesn't matter how old the kids are. It's family night. Dad's got to come home. Mom doesn't do anything else. Nobody's on Facebook with their friends, and they do stuff together, whatever it might be. So, but if you schedule it ahead of time, it's a good thing. I know I just was very happy to spend one whole week, first time ever. My wife and I spent a whole week with our 3 grandkids, and I had to schedule it way ahead of time. Mostly because they were so busy. It was like, my schedule was like, well, how about this, or this? That I was easy. But to schedule the 3 grandkids like a whole week that they were free to spend with us. But you have to plan those things ahead of time. So I would suggest that. Forget today, maybe forget this week, next week, something like that. Is that okay? So first, realize how important it is. Second of all, keep in mind, especially with kids, they grow very fast, really fast. And before you know it, it's like, Mom, can I have the keys to the car? That's like the depth of your conversation with them, So keep that in mind too. Don't put too much pressure on yourself, but just, think that it really is a priority now. And there may be certain other things that you'd like to do. I like to redecorate the house, or maybe not now, because the time I would spend doing that, I can spend with the kids. Maybe the house decoration comes in a couple of years when the kids don't are doing more of their own things. Right now, this has got to be my priority. Okay? Yeah. So prioritize it, and then schedule. Okay. Anybody want to share some tips you have with her question? How do you find time for that in the midst of your busy lives with your kids or other family members? Or you want to share a thought on that? Okay. The curtain opens at 8? Okay, so we'll try to squeeze it in before.
Thank you, Prabhu, for picking this verse. The thing I liked is we need to focus on doing what is giving happiness to the soul. Could you expound on that? Doing devotional service for many years becomes monotonous. Could you?
Prabhu said that it's our responsibility, as leaders, and in part we're leaders of our own selves, to create ever fresh challenges. So that also can be a challenge as we get older, because sometimes you kind of get in your comfort zone. So we have to provide ever fresh challenges. So, okay, whatever. geez, it's hard for me to read the Bhagavatam. So there's other literatures. Have we read the Chaitanya Charitamrita? Have we read all of Prabhupada's biographies? Have we read all of the, whatever? Shivaram Swami's writing some wonderful books these days. And of course, we don't want to read those auxiliary literatures first. We start with Prabhupada, just an example. Or, it's just, I'm not so excited. I've done the Bhakti Viksha program for 20 years. I'm not so excited. Okay, well, what's another service you can take up? Hand that off to somebody else and take up, what's the other service I can do? Well, there's nobody here doing any kind of college. Just an example, just making it up. There's nobody doing college outreach work, so how could I get involved in that? Or, gosh, Anuttama is the communications director. I wonder if anybody in Naperville is reaching out to the local government officials and the academics and the Hindu community and the neighbors, and maybe I can help with that. Or, I know my Guru Maharaj is really involved in a particular project and he likes to do PowerPoint presentations. Can I help him do PowerPoint presentations? Or, like that, look for something new. And part of it too is like with kids and adults as well, finding things that are of interest to them. When Prabhupada came to America, he was just creating more and more things for his disciples to do. Okay, go start a magazine. Dr. Tom Hopkins mentions that devotees at Prabhupada said go start a magazine and never even had a subscription to a magazine before. But Prabhupada told them go start a magazine because he wanted to give them that challenge. And then he said, okay, it's like, okay, you 6 go to London, okay? And you go to Germany, you go to Africa, and you go to Australia, and you go to Hong Kong, and you go to Russia. Any questions? It's kind of like that. And these weren't, these most were not, big sannyasis. When Prabhupada sent people, they were devotees for 2 years, 3 years, maybe 5 years. But he gave them those challenges. So that's one thing to think about. Yeah. If our consciousness is really pure, we would never find anything stale because we would see Krishna in it. But we're not so pure, and sometimes they can at least appear a little monotonous. So some fresh challenges. Even like with the cooks, right? If every morning it's the exact same khichdi with the exact same papadam. If you're transcendental, it's Krishna Prasad. Even 1 grain of dried rice is ecstatic. But if we're not, then some variety. It's good. Okay? Okay, so we should stop there. I think curtain's going to open in a minute. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.